Falcon 9 is in startup.
Ground gas closeout is complete.
Go for launch. Stage 2 is pressing for flight.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Stage 1, pressing for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 throttle bucket.
Power and telemetry nominal. For those of you just joining us, you are watching a live view of the Falcon 9 rocket as it ascends through the atmosphere carrying the SpaceX Dragon 2 capsule to
Vehicle
orbit.
is supersonic.
The vehicle just passed through max Q, which is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. As you can hear in the background, the excitement at SpaceX headquarters is unbelievable here.
Stage 1 throttle
Vehicle
up.
is passing through max Q.
You heard that call out from max Q on the nets. The Falcon 9 actually throttles down its 9 Merlin engines to reduce aerodynamic loads on the vehicle. It is now throttling those engines back up. Coming up at T plus 2 minutes and 35 seconds is going to be three events in quick succession. The first one is going to be the main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's when the 9 Merlin 1D engines that you can see on your screen right now will cut off shortly before a stage separation at 2 minutes and 38 seconds. Shortly after that, the Merlin vacuum engine on the bottom of the second stage of the Falcon 9 will ignite in what we call second engine start, or SES. That'll be at 2 minutes and 46 seconds. So stand by for main engine cutoff, stage separation, and second engine start coming up in just about 20 seconds from now. As you can hear from the cheering here at SpaceX headquarters, we did have a successful main engine cutoff, a stage separation, and as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, that second stage engine is currently started and accelerating Dragon towards orbit. On the left-hand side of your screen, that is a view from the first stage as it makes its way back down towards the Earth. Let's go down to Lauren and Dan for updates on that first stage recovery.
All right, so as you can just see, we lifted off. We had an awesome liftoff of stage 1, and stage 2 is burning beautifully. Stage 1 also has a secondary mission that it is performing right now, which is getting ready to come back to the drone ship and land. So stage 1 is going to execute 2 burns before landing on the drone ship. The first is the entry burn start, which is starting at T plus 7 minutes and 48 seconds approximately. That's where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite. And what that burn does is it slows down stage one as it re-enters the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere. If we didn't do that, that aerodynamic re-entry heating, the aero heating would heat up stage one, and it would potentially break it apart. So we got to slow it down. From there, stage one is going to coast its way back down using those grid fins to help steer it, and then it'll execute the landing burn. That's going to happen at T plus 9 minutes and 24 seconds. That's where we're going to reignite that center E9 engine to hopefully bring stage one down to a beautiful stop right on the drone ship.
That's right, and while all that's happening, the second stage, which you can see glowing bright here, continuing to power Dragon, it's going to continue burning until just about 9 minutes after launch. So at 8 minutes and 59 seconds is where it's targeted to cut off. Down to a single engine, but that one providing a little over 200,000 pounds of thrust to carry Dragon through the upper parts of Earth's atmosphere. Not as much resistance to fight against once you're up this high. And it's going to get Dragon into that initial orbit, and it's still going to be a couple hundred kilometers beneath the station, and then it'll be turned over to thrusters on Dragon once it separates from that second stage to then begin the chase down of the orbiting laboratory. But 5 minutes, 11 seconds and counting past launch. All the calls so far indicating nominal performance. So we're continuing to see great stuff so far from both stages of Falcon 9.
Okay, we're hearing that MVAC is performing nominally. It's looking good on power. Temperatures are good. And stage one continues to come back nominally. And look over there on the left on your screen, you see that picture of Ripley in that zero-G indicator.
That's right. Keep an eye out as long as we have the view. As soon as Dragon's separated and it's essentially then in its free flight mode, you're going to see that little planet Earth start to float up. So keep an eye out once we separate Dragon in just a couple of minutes from now. 6 minutes past launch.
Trajectory continues to be nominal on stage two. Still have about 2.5 more minutes left of this burn, at which point MVAC will shut down. We're just under a minute away from that entry burn on stage one that I mentioned before. Second stage burn continues to burn nominally.
Right, we're over 7 minutes since that liftoff. Feels like it was 30 seconds ago. Continuing to carry Dragon up. It's going to make it to that initial orbit after it separates. The separation coming about a minute after that second stage cutoff.
Stage two, propellant tank pressures are looking good. The burn continues to be healthy. Now coming up in about 10 seconds, that entry burn is going to start. Hopefully we'll have onboard video and you'll be able to watch. Let's listen in on the call-outs.
Stage one, FTS is safe.
Stage one, entry burn has started.
Look at that plume. Push 3 M1D engines reigniting. Burn is going to continue on for about another 18 or so seconds.
Yeah, so a little back-to-back action now as we see stage one coming back down towards Earth, stage two still making its way up into outer space. The Dragon still nestled on top, getting ready.
Stage one, entry burn, shutdown.
And there's the end of that stage one shutdown.
Okay, so stage one is going to continue to coast its way down using those grid fins for attitude control and steering.
Next
and in just under a
Steering
minute.
ship, AOS.
Ah, that's right. It's coming up in about 10 seconds. INVAC's throttling now for SECO.
Stage 1 is transonic.
And we have had a successful shutdown of INVAC. All right. Stage 1 landing burn is supposed to start. At the start of that burn, stage 1 will be traveling at 275 meters per second. That single engine burn is going to bring that from 275 to 0.
We did just hear that stage 1 landing burn has started.
All right, let's see if we get it. About 500 kilometers away from where it launched from. The vehicle will now undergo its safing procedures, and the recovery team will make sure it's strapped down and it'll make its way back to Earth. Or sorry, back to Cape Canaveral. It's already on. So there's still a lot more to go here. We have Dragon separation coming up. Let's go back to Tom Perderio to cover that next big milestone.
Wow, what a landing. Coming up very shortly in just about 20 seconds here, the Dragon spacecraft is going to be separating from the top of the Falcon 9 rocket.
And we just heard the call up to the International Space Station crew. Dragon is go for approach. You can hardly see the thrusters firing, so it's leaving that waypoint number 2 where it's been sitting at 20 meters away. Now it's time for the final docking.
At 20 meters, Dragon was just spitting distance away from that international docking adapter. Now it is closing those 20 meters in preparation for soft capture. So right now it is orbital nighttime. So the light you're seeing is both light from the International Space Station pointed at Dragon, and then the docking light, which is the bright spot in the center of Dragon's hatch, you can see right now. Right now, Dragon's flight computer is using those Draco thrusters, as you can see them firing on your screen to
Station Houston and 1, Dragon is resuming approach and is go for docking. Monitor per steps 9 and 10 in 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Station copies. Vehicle mode is approach to docking port. Primary range is decreasing. Vehicle is centered.
Copy all.
And getting good reports from Ann McLean there on board the International Space Station. Dragon is approaching, everything in on the center, and still looking good. So the crew is using that centerline camera on the Dragon spacecraft just to do all of their final monitoring of the vehicle. This camera a little off center. This is not the one the crew's using, but this is one that we have. But you can see now that international docking adapter. It's attached to a larger black piece of the station. That's a pressurized mating adapter, which is then attached to actually one of the modules, which is known as Node 2 in the Harmony. It's the Harmony module. So Dragon continuing to close in. It's expected to take just about 5 minutes or so, and there's a great side-by-side look. One view on your left from Dragon, one view on your right from the International Space Station.
On the view on the left from Dragon looking at the space station, we can finally see those details of the international docking adapter. The IDA is a passive system, and the Dragon contains all the active components of that docking system. You can actually see those androgynous petals, those 3 petals that are kind of sticking at 120 degrees apart from each other on the IDA on the left-hand side. In the very middle is actually a visual docking target that the astronauts can use to judge whether or not the Dragon is right on course. It has a little stick that comes off from the center of it, so you can see the stick's shadow and determine whether or not you're directly on center in all 3 axes. Like Dan said, this camera view on the left from Dragon is not the centerline camera. It's actually the forward media cam.
Range is 9.5 and decreasing. Vehicle is centered. Largest excursion observed is less than half a meter. And less than half a degree.
Copy.
All right, we're inside 10 meters. Halfway there.
Like I was saying, this camera view right here is just a little bit off center from the center line, so it may look like we're not approaching that IDA directly head on, just because the camera's not in the right position, but the crew has that center line camera, which is directly dead on, and as long as we keep hearing these good callouts, it sounds like Dragon is dead right where it needs to be. And there it is, there's that center line camera view that the crew in the International Space Station is using. They use the overlays to figure out, and that visual docking guide right there to make sure that Dragon is exactly where it needs to be as it approaches. On the right-hand side, you can start to see the mechanisms of the SpaceX docking system aboard the Dragon. The very first part of Dragon that will make contact with the ISS is that soft capture ring. You can see it's extended forward from the hatch of the Dragon right now. As soon as those pedals make contact, latching pawls will engage and hold the pedals against the opposite ones on the IDA, and contact pins will depress, and we should hear the call out for soft capture achieved.
Hands off point.
Copy.
All right, so we're at that crew hands-off point. That means we're about 2 meters away. Crew no longer sending commands. Dragon doing everything on its own.
From the inside of the International Space Station, looking towards the forward hatch. The hatch is open. They are way ahead of schedule. 6:38 a.m. Central Time. The hatch to the International Docking Adapter has been open. Taking a few pictures inside, still some work to do until they get to the hatch of the Crew Dragon. But in the meantime, a major milestone. Towards the camera the most, you see David St. Jacques looking over, Commander Expedition 58 Commander Oleg Kononenko on the right, wearing protective gear in case there are any foreign objects or debris. She has goggles you may be seeing here in a minute, is NASA's Anne McClain. Right now conducting a survey of the inside between the pressurized mating adapter, where the 3 crew members are right now, and through the hatchway to the International Docking Adapter. Just conducting a survey, making sure everything is okay. Once they confirm these next steps, they'll be able to perform the next major milestone, which will be the hatch opening of the Crew Dragon, right on the other side of that open hatch right now.
At step 4.1, the APAS hatch is open. There was no sign of warp, no condensation. There was a little bit of dust in the air initially. That's all we observed.
Copy all.
This is Mission Control Houston. You just heard David St. Jacques, flight engineer of Expedition 58, astronaut of the Canadian Space Agency, providing a little update on what's on the other side of the hatch there. Nothing too major, just a little bit of dust, but otherwise pretty clear. Astronauts continuing to conduct the survey. You can see some of the flashes of the camera at the hands now of NASA's Anne McClain. That says Anne McLean in the back there. You can see with the headlamp, David St. Jacques providing a mounted light at the hatchway between the pressurized mating adapter and node 2. Provide a little bit of extra light into the international docking adapter area. Again, Anne McLean wearing the protective gear just in case of any foreign objects. Recently, David St. Jacques reported minimal dust, but otherwise pretty clean. After conducting the survey and wrapping up with any photography taken during this time, the next major milestone will be to open another hatch that's beyond this one that you're seeing right now. That is the hatch of the Crew Dragon, currently docked to the forward end of the International Space Station. Docking time for that vehicle was 4:51 a.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston. If you're just joining us, 3 Expedition 58 crew members about to open the hatch of the Crew Dragon. The hatch currently open between the pressurized mating adapter, where you see David St. Jacques on the left and Oleg Kononenko on the right, and McLean inside the international docking adapter. Joining us now is Dan Hewitt. Joining us now, Dan and Tom from Hawthorne, California, at SpaceX's Mission Control. Let's hear some updates from their end on the updates, the latest updates of the Crew Dragon, and what's to expect for these procedures as the crew begins to head towards opening the hatch and actually going inside. Dan and Tom.
All right, thanks, Gary. And yeah, we're watching along from here too. Thanks for taking us from docking to where we are now. And yeah, we got one hatch open. We got one more to go. So obviously that second hatch being opened is the one we're really looking for when we get the hatch open and the crew can actually start going inside a Dragon.
Yeah, it's been a very exciting night here at SpaceX headquarters on Hawthorne. We're all very much anticipating this second hatch opening. As you can see on your screen right here, this is a view from inside the International Space Station. And the crew right now is kind of huddled in the pressurized mating adapter. They currently have the hatch between that PMA and the International docking adapter open. And they're currently just doing the final checks before they open the second hatch, which is in the top of Crew Dragon.
Yeah, and if anybody has been tuned in, we're expecting that potentially in the next 5 minutes or so. The crew is just going to have to do some final checks, and then we'll be ready to go. So that hatch opening could come as early as 4:50 a.m. Pacific time. Sorry to keep jumping around on time zones, but we are in different parts of the country as all the teams are working together. But it could be coming in just about 5 minutes from now.
Pretty shortly, the crew in the space station is going to be donning some protective gear. This is just a precaution, as this is the first time that the Dragon spacecraft has docked with the International Space Station. It's a precaution to make sure that there's no particulates in the air or anything that happen between the ascent and docking. So you might be seeing them donning some masks right before they open that hatch.
That's right. And one of the first things they'll do is they'll actually go in and take an air sample reading just before the actual air and Dragon mixes with the air on board the space station. So they'll pop in real quick and take those air samples and then come back and just compare everything.
Go ahead, Ann.
Just put a couple photos on SSC-13. I just noticed 2 pieces of fog on the Dragon hatch on the outside. One of them just looks like a small piece of string or rope that's on the hatch label. The second one is about 1.5 inches, and it looks, what it appears as is a kind of clear plasticky type of material. But I put some photos on SSC 13.
Okay, copy the 2 items that you've noticed, and then them being on SSC 13, and we'll get those pulled down.
And so just there, NASA astronaut Anne McLean, so she reported she saw 2 pieces of FOD, that's an acronym, that's foreign object debris, and that's basically any object or any piece of material that isn't necessarily expected to be there.
Happy to report that the initial look through the window, everything looks great. Ripley and Earth both look like they enjoyed their trip up here, and I see no signs of any off-nominal undetected events.
Great stuff.
You just heard that sounds like they're getting a good look through the window in the hatch of that Dragon 2. They were able to see Ripley and the zero-G indicator inside there, I think. Looks like everything looks nominal from their point of view. Hopefully they'll get a first-hand look once they get that hatch open. The Dragon 2 hatch does have a window mounted right in the center, and that's the crew can, during docking operations, if they were inside, could be able to look straight outside and verify with their own eyes, if they needed to, that the docking was proceeding nominally. Tough to see that window right now just because of the geometry of the pressurized mating adapter, but looks like they're able to get a good look.
Yeah, again, once the crew gets the hatch open, the first thing they'll do is go in and take a couple of air samples, and they'll come back. They'll leave the hatch open and come and compare those air samples to basically just the background samples that they get from inside the space station. That's one of the interesting things about being in microgravity is there's no natural convection. So the atmosphere inside the Dragon capsule, even though you open up the hatchway, as long as the pressures are pretty much the same, the air's not going to start mixing until we actually engage some active measures. They have a bunch of fans throughout the entire space station just to actively move the air, because if you were to just sit in a cabin in microgravity, the air wouldn't move on its own. That's one of the things that they would always talk about. Some of the crew members would, if you stay in one place and you're constantly breathing out, you'll kind of get a bubble of CO2 around you as you're exhaling. So it's always good for them to move around. But so they're going to open up the hatch and take those air sample readings, and then once everything checks out okay, they kick on the fans and they actually start circulating all of the air inside of Dragon with that of the rest of the space station. So Dragon already drawing on power from the station, and pretty soon going to be sharing its oxygen and its atmosphere too.
It's kind of crazy, all these things we take for granted here on Earth in the presence of gravity, so changed by the lack of it on orbit. We're getting some views right now past the astronauts into that international docking adapter. This was the vestibule that Dan and I had been talking about earlier. And what's interesting is that the place where they're kind of poking their heads into just a few hours ago was exposed to the vacuum of space, and now been pressurized up after a hard capture of the Dragon capsule.
And one of the usual questions that people will ask astronauts is, does space have a smell? And a lot of them will tell you the first time you open up a hatch to a new vehicle, or when crew members come back inside after a spacewalk, they do report space having a smell. They usually say it smells almost like burnt metal. Some believe that might be the atomic oxygen which is out in the environment, but they might be smelling that right now, because the area that they're in, where they're basically inside the International Docking Adapter now, was just exposed to space a couple hours ago.
They're right up next to that blinking strobe light that we saw right now on the mounted right in the center of that Dragon hatch that we watched come ever so closely during those docking maneuvers.
And again, just 3 crew members right now on board the space station. It's the Expedition 58 crew. They're led by a Russian cosmonaut, Oleg Kononenko, who's at the bottom of the camera, kind of floating in and out. In the center of your camera is NASA astronaut Anne McClain, and further along in the pressurized mating adapter right up against the hatch is a Canadian astronaut, David St. Jacques.
There you can see a straight shot through that pressurized mating adapter, and then the international docking adapter, and then you can actually just make out a little bit of that Crew Dragon hatch that will soon be opening.
Are the crew gracious enough to give us a bit of a zoom there? There it is. There's the hatch.
It's worth noting that the pressurized mating adapter is actually how the space shuttle also docked with the International Space Station.
Station on 2, step 5.7. We're ready for final Dragon hatch equalization.
Checking.
And so Anne McClain calling down. The crew just about done with their steps, so the teams on the ground are going to check it out, make sure everything is equalized between Dragon itself. So again, you want to make sure that the pressure inside the spacecraft and inside the space station are the same. Otherwise, opening the hatch could either be really difficult or a little more dynamic than you might want. So always a good idea, and always the last thing that they do, just to make sure these pressures are equal.
Equalization time. We're still looking into it. We're seeing Dragon temperatures just a little bit higher than expected, so we should have that for you shortly.
Copy.
As Dan mentioned, we're just now waiting for the crew aboard the space station to verify that everything is good inside that Dragon capsule. It's in contact with the capsule via the umbilicals.
And the expected equalization time would be 2 minutes or less.
Be 2 minutes or less.
As you just heard, it sounds like equalization may be complete as early as 2 minutes from now. But we're getting all that. They're getting Dragon telemetry via those umbilicals that plugged in shortly after hard capture, and they're able to monitor all of the telemetry channels coming out of Dragon, which includes things like air cabin temperature and pressure, humidity, presence of any other things inside the air. And by monitoring those, they can make sure that the pressure and temperature are at appropriate levels to open that hatch.
And just a quick handover. We'll get that video communication back with the station momentarily. We should have a pretty solid block coming up, so as long as everything continues to move along quickly, we're going to have great views of that hatch open. Everything gone well ahead of the timeline so far today. Docking was early.
It's great news.
Yeah, the crew's been moving through all of these steps really quickly and should get the hatch open early as well.
On your screen right now, you can see the two mission control centers currently watching over the operations on orbit right now. On the left is Johnson, and on the right is mission control at SpaceX, where Dan and I are right now.
Yep. We can't wave from that camera view, but yeah, we're just over top overlooking them, and those teams have been working hand in hand pretty much since the vehicle launch. Things really kicking off with what we call integrated operations, and that was just about when we went on the air earlier today before the docking, which is about 2.5 hours or so before the actual docking to the space station, and that was just when everything's really in lockstep between the two teams, sending to Dragon and making sure that the station's ready to receive it. But everything went real smoothly. We went through all the demos, had no issues the whole way up, and actually docked ahead of time. That docking again was at 2:51 a.m. Pacific time, 5:51 a.m. on the other coast over at the east there. For everyone, a little bit earlier in the morning for us.
Can't complain about early.
Can't complain when it's space flight operations. They don't tend to follow our clocks, they follow their own clock, which the space station follows Greenwich Mean Time. That's what the crew's on, and that's what we use to coordinate all of the different teams around the globe.
Checking.
And that's Ann McLean that we're hearing, and she's just reporting that the crew is just about ready, and so we should hopefully be getting that hatch opening coming real soon. Right. So the ground is still looking for the pressures to all equal out, and then as soon as that looks good, they'll be ready to press forward. But again, I think hatch opening was originally supposed to be about 45 minutes from now, so we are still well ahead of our timeline for the day.
Now, once they open the hatch, we're still not done. There's still a lot more tests to run to make sure that Crew Dragon is safe to enter and make sure that everything looks nominal. We will actually right now seeing some live views inside the Crew Dragon spacecraft right there. You can see Ripley sitting over in the far left seat, and of course the zero gravity indicator, which has taken the liking to that footrest on the closest seat to the screen.
Which this has me really excited, because anybody who's followed a lot of space station operations over the years, I can't remember a time we've had the view from inside the spacecraft that just docked as the hatch gets open. So this is going to be really cool to see the hatch come open from this perspective, what the astronauts will actually be seeing when they're sitting inside this vehicle, and we'll be able to see the space station crew come through.
You can imagine seeing a time lapse of this footage from launch, when they closed the side hatch of the Dragon to load all the cargo in, and then fast forwarded to now when astronauts on orbit are about to enter through the forward hatch. It's just unbelievable.
Team station on 2 for ingress.
Go ahead, David.
All right, at step 13.5, IMB ducting is installed, ready for IMB fan activation.
Copy. We'll go for fan activation. And David, for you, if the footrests are being a little bit challenging to secure to the seats, you're welcome to bring some Velcro straps with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I retrieved one of those white webbing straps. I think that would work fine.
Sounds great to us.
And for SA, at step 13.1, I did not restrain the hatch. It felt secure enough as is.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a view from the inside of the Crew and Dragon spacecraft. This is SpaceX's human-rated vehicle that's currently attached to the forward end of the International Space Station. If you missed it, it docked earlier this morning at 4:51 a.m. Central Time. And the hatch was finally opened between Dragon and the station at 7:07 a.m. Central Time. At this time, the International Space Station is 255 statute miles over the North Pacific Ocean, about to enter into an orbital sunrise. At this time, the crew is a little bit ahead of schedule for their operations of entering into Dragon and conducting a series of maintenance activity, or I guess a series of activities that are a part of basically welcoming the Dragon vehicle to the International Space Station. Of this includes the installation of some ducting, part of the ventilation system that helps cycle air from the station, or from Dragon to the station. They're also going to be installing some window covers and check several valves inside the Dragon's cabin. Again, the crew is a little bit ahead of schedule. We currently have a welcome ceremony currently slated for 9:35 a.m. Central Time. We'll keep you updated with the latest as the crew continues to fly through their scheduled activities to get the Dragon completely outfitted for its stay, almost a week stay on board the International Space Station. You're going to look at David St. Jacques, Canadian Space Agency astronaut of Expedition 58 inside, conducting some of these installation activities. Again, stay with us as we continue to provide live coverage, some of these views from the inside of the station and the Dragon vehicle. Still tracking a welcome ceremony for 9:35 a.m. Central. We'll give you the latest as we learn more, and these astronauts continue to fly through their scheduled activities.
in the station is supposed to go into ISS thrusters enabled.
Copy.
So there you can see on your screen visual confirmation. What a gorgeous shot. Dragon has undocked from the International Space Station, and we are beginning the departure.
That's right, and you're going to hear the voice of David St. Jacques again. He's the one inside of the station monitoring Dragon for its departure. It's slowly backing away. Everything's looked good so far with those separation burns. Again, as Gary said, that physical separation, that undocking coming at 11:32 p.m. here Pacific.
Station Houston at 2, Dragon departure burn 0 complete.
So you heard us mention earlier that we have a series of 4 departure burns, starting with 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. We have confirmation that departure burn 0 has been completed.
That's right, and so with that one down, we're going to start seeing Dragon begin flying actually above the International Space Station, and then coming up in just a couple of minutes, departure burn 1, the second departure burn, will be coming. That should be in about 4 or 5 minutes from now, and so we're going to see Dragon just kind of swing its way over top the space station and eventually fly out of both the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid. And so the keep-out sphere is one of my favorite things. It's an imaginary sphere with about a 200-mile radius, so 200-meter radius. That would be a much bigger sphere. A 200-meter radius in all directions, and that just governs, so kind of like the approach ellipsoid, which I explained earlier, before you're in the keep-out sphere, any maneuvers with the spacecraft have to be safe and not get inside within 4 orbits.
Dragon is in the corridor, and opening rate is as expected.
Copy.
And David St. Jacques reporting everything looking good so far. You heard him say the corridors, so they, on their overlays that they have on their laptops on board the station where they're actually monitoring Dragon, they're looking for any perturbations outside of the expected path. Dragon continuing to fly free. Look, everything looking good so far.
So just in case you've just tuned in, we are currently watching Dragon as it departs from the International Space Station. It's been a really smooth operation so far with the undocking procedure, and now we're moving into departure. As of right now, you can see on your screen the Dragon capsule moving away from the approach ellipsoid. There we can see the nose cone still in its open position, leaving the forward hatch exposed. We will be closing that prior to Dragon's re-entry.
And so we're continuing to get really great views. Dragon backdrop by the inky blackness of space. You'll see the cameras are a little bit jerky in their motions. They're actually being controlled by somebody on the ground in mission control. We always like to talk about how in mission control over in Houston, that's where they actually fly the space station. That's where they control everything from the cameras and the communication to even the thermostat on board the space station. If it's too hot for the crew, they talk to the ground, and they're the ones who can turn the AC out. But so it's actually somebody at a console right now who's controlling those cameras, sending commands just to move all the pan, tilt, focus, everything else. They're doing it from a console on Earth while the thing is flying 250 statute miles over. And so this is a view from that WB-57 airplane. You were looking at Dragon streaking across the sky on its re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, aiming for a splashdown in just a little while from now.
So it's pretty exciting that we get this shot right now, as it is our first view from planet Earth of the Dragon capsule since it lifted off from Cape Canaveral just several days ago.
I will say this is a pretty rare treat to be able to see this here. And again, this video is coming from a NASA airplane that we're flying around that recovery zone there, a WB-57. It's commonly used for a lot of atmospheric studies and other science missions. But able to put a tracking camera on it to try and get this re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere today. We're hearing that they should have AOSO acquisition of signal back with the Dragon spacecraft. Right now it's about 46 kilometers in altitude. The Dragon spacecraft continuing to descend. It's now subsonic, so already starting to slow down thanks to the aero braking, basically slamming into that Earth's atmosphere, causes a lot of friction and allows the vehicle to eventually reach its terminal velocity, basically. And then those parachutes are going to kick in.
So there you have visual confirmation of the deployment of our drogue parachutes. This is the first of 2 parachute deployments.
So those drogue chutes do the initial slowing, and then they're ultimately going to pull out the 4 main parachutes responsible for really slowing the spacecraft down prior to that splashdown.
You can hear cheering here at SpaceX headquarters as the employees that have gathered around our Mission Control Center are sharing the same view as you. What a gorgeous shot of Dragon coming back down.
And here come the mains.
Seconds, we will see those main parachutes exactly like that begin to expand as they capture more air, further decelerating the Dragon vehicle down to the Atlantic Ocean. Really can't ask for a more picture-perfect shot than that.
And yes, all 4 chutes now deployed. It's going to continue to descend. It's going to continue to slow down and then ultimately splash down in the Atlantic there. We're now under 1 kilometer in altitude. Just about 750 meters to go.
In case if you're just joining us, you can see on your screen there, Dragon has just re-entered the Earth's atmosphere after departing from the International Space Station. We have a gorgeous shot of 4 healthy parachutes deployed and slowing the vehicle down as it is approaching the surface of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida.
And it's continuing to descend under those chutes. We just passed 500 meters. Everything continuing to look good via reports to all the flight control teams. Now we're at about 400 meters. And just passing 300 meters, continuing to descend. We might be right on time. We were planning on splashing down at about 5:45 a.m. Pacific, and we're getting real close to that bingo time. Just past 200 meters.
And we have confirmation that Dragon is now under 100 meters, is 100 meters above the surface of the ocean.
So next up, standing by for splashdown.
Confirmation of splashdown. Dragon has returned to planet Earth. It is now back home, and you can see on your screen our 2 fast boats racing out to the capsule, now in recovery.
That splashdown came right on time, 5:45 a.m. Pacific, 8:45 a.m. over on the East Coast. the teams that have been ready and waiting, they were staged just a few nautical miles away. They're going to start moving in now. You can see those 2 fast approach boats already speeding their way towards the capsule.
And the sooner we can get you home and get them on deck and then eventually back on land will help their recovery process.
All right, so we're continuing to get these views. What's kind of ahead for you and the rest of the teams? I know you said it's going to be about a 30-minute or a 30-hour boat ride back into harbor.
Yeah, that'll be probably about the same going back. I think we'll be out here another hour or so, maybe 2 hours, just getting everything situated, and the SpaceX team on Go Searcher, once they give us the go, then we'll start heading back to port. And we're supposed to arrive late Saturday night back into Port Canaveral.
All right, well, Shane, we'll let you get back to watching all the operations. I know you got a job to do other than talking to us, but I do really appreciate you calling in from all the way out there in Atlantic. It was a great splashdown, and we'll see you when you're back in Houston.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of the scenes out here as you're getting them from the Go Navigator. Take care.
All right. And again, that was NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough. He's out with the NASA teams. We're on a boat watching as the Go Searcher gets a little bit closer. Looks like pretty soon they're going to start reeling that Dragon in, and we're going to get to see it go up onto the Dragon nest.
Right now we're just waiting for Dragon to lift up and out of the water and into the nest.
And there it goes.
So there facing us is what we call the side hatch, and that is where, as Dan just mentioned, the astronauts would, if we had astronauts on board today, where they would be exiting. The top hatch is what we use to connect to the ISS, and that is currently hidden underneath the nose cone. But like we said, astronauts will be coming out of the side hatch. Yeah, and we got a beautiful shot there. Now the hydraulic lift is coming back towards us, and it is preparing to lower the Dragon capsule into its nest. Like we said, we are treating this demonstration mission with the recovery operations as if there were actual astronauts on board. And of course, before we would be able to open the hatch, we would have to make sure that the spacecraft's cabin pressure is equalized with the outside environment before doing so. So once Dragon is seated, and you can hear some cheers behind me as the remaining folks that we have here on the SpaceX team outside of Mission Control are cheering with the placement of Dragon into the nest there, as you can see.